Have you ever wondered what would happen if you discovered that your entire understanding of spirituality was built on a fundamental misconception? What if the very foundation of how you approach the divine has been keeping you trapped in a cycle of spiritual frustration and disconnection? This isn't just a hypothetical question. It gets to the heart of one of Jesus's most profound yet misunderstood statements. You are gods. When most of us hear these three words from Jesus, we tend to brush past them as merely poetic or metaphorical, perhaps even a bit too mystical or controversial to take literally. But what if this declaration wasn't just symbolic language? What if Jesus was revealing something radical about your true identity that could completely transform your spiritual journey? Has this ever happened to you? You find yourself praying fervently, perhaps during a moment of crisis or deep need, yet feeling as though your words are simply dissipating into the void, as if there's an unbridgeable gap between you and the divine presence you're trying to reach. That sense of separation isn't accidental. It's the result of a spiritual paradigm that has dominated religious thinking for centuries. Most of us have been conditioned to approach our relationship with the divine from a position of fundamental separation. We view ourselves as distant from God, like spiritual orphans desperately trying to get the attention of a powerful but somehow remote parent. We plead, we bargain, we make promises, all operating from the underlying assumption that we exist apart from the divine source we're attempting to connect with. But what you're about to discover in this video might completely reshape how you understand your place in the cosmos. The revolutionary truth behind Jesus's "You are God's" declaration isn't about elevating human ego or making grandiose spiritual claims. It's about recognizing an essential reality about your true nature that has been hidden in plain sight. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this exploration, because we're going to unpack what happens when you truly awaken to this understanding. This isn't about adopting a new belief system or adding another spiritual concept to your collection. It's about experiencing a fundamental shift in consciousness that changes everything about how you relate to the divine. When you begin to grasp what Jesus really meant with those three powerful words, you'll notice that your prayers transform from desperate pleas into conscious recognition. Your spiritual practice evolves from exhausting effort into natural allowing. The very foundation of your spiritual experience shifts from an ongoing struggle into an effortless unfolding of what has always been true. This paradigm shift challenges the very core of traditional religious thinking, the idea that you must somehow bridge an impossible gap between yourself and the divine. But what if there was never a gap to begin with? What if the spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you're not, but recognizing what has always been true about who you really are? When you look at how Jesus himself approached his connection with the divine, you notice something remarkable that traditional religious teachings often gloss over. Throughout his ministry, Jesus never once approached God from a position of separation or lack. Have you ever noticed that? He never begged, he never pleaded, he never bargained with the divine as if trying to convince a reluctant deity to help him. Instead, Jesus spoke with an unwavering confidence that mystified those around him. This wasn't spiritual arrogance or religious showmanship. It was the natural expression of someone who fully understood his relationship with divine source. Jesus operated from a profound mindset shift, a recognition of an eternal truth that existed before time began. If this message resonated with your spirit, hit subscribe and join our community of seekers exploring these profound spiritual truths together. The hidden truth behind Jesus' approach was his deep understanding that the divine nature isn't something external or separate from us. It's not a distant power we need to reach through spiritual effort, religious rituals, or perfect behavior. This is the revelation that turns our conventional spiritual journey completely upside down. What Jesus was desperately trying to help humanity understand is that your divine nature is your original identity, your true self beneath all the layers of conditioning and false beliefs about separation that have accumulated throughout your life. This isn't just a beautiful spiritual concept. It's a revolutionary understanding about the fundamental nature of reality itself. Behind the scenes of Jesus' teachings was this consistent revelation. You are not a human being trying desperately to connect with God. You are divine life temporarily expressing through human form. The impact of this understanding cannot be overstated. It completely transforms the decisions you make in your spiritual practice and in your everyday life. When Jesus declared, "You are God's," he was pointing to this profound truth about your original nature. The divine isn't something you need to search for, strive toward, or somehow convince to help you. It's who you are beneath the surface-level identity that feels separate and limited. This understanding completely reshapes the spiritual journey from one of acquisition to one of revelation, uncovering what has always been true rather than striving to become something you're not. Think about how this mindset transformation might change your approach to prayer. Instead of begging an external power for help, you begin recognizing the divine qualities already present within your true nature. Instead of approaching the divine as a beggar, you approach as a conscious expression of that same divine life. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a powerful metaphor that illuminates this truth in a way that's impossible to forget. Because once you truly grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's," your entire spiritual journey undergoes a profound transformation. From seeking to finding, from striving to allowing, from separation to recognition of what has always been true. If you're feeling a resonance with this truth deep within you right now, write in the comments, "This awakens something in me." Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if you approached each day, each challenge, each relationship from the consciousness that Jesus had when he declared, "You are God's." This isn't just a minor adjustment to your spiritual practice. It's a complete transformation of consciousness that revolutionizes every aspect of your life. When this understanding truly takes root within you, your prayers undergo a remarkable metamorphosis. They shift from desperate pleas addressed to a distant deity to conscious recognition of what's already present. The entire energy of your spiritual practice evolves from exhausting striving to peaceful allowing. What was once a struggle transforms into a natural, effortless unfolding of your divine nature. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a fundamental shift in how you perceive yourself in relation to the divine. Rather than seeing yourself as a separate entity trying to reach an external God through effort, discipline, or perfect behavior, you begin to recognize your essential oneness with divine source. This revelation completely reshapes the journey from one of achievement to one of awakening. This mindset revolution becomes even clearer when we look at another profound statement Jesus made that perfectly aligns with "You are God's." When he proclaimed, "I and my Father are one," many religious traditions have interpreted this as a special claim unique to Jesus alone, something that set him apart from humanity. But that interpretation misses the revolutionary impact of what Jesus was actually revealing. The hidden truth is that Jesus wasn't making an exclusive claim that applied only to himself. He was unveiling a universal truth about every human being's relationship with divine source. This was never meant to be a special revelation that separated Jesus from humanity, but rather one that invited all of humanity to recognize their true nature. The decisions we make from this understanding are entirely different from those made from a mindset of separation. When you recognize that oneness with the divine isn't something you need to achieve through decades of spiritual practice, meditation, or religious devotion, but is instead the very foundation of your existence, everything changes. Your spiritual journey shifts from seeking something outside yourself to recognizing what has always been present within and expressing through you. This realization isn't about inflating the human ego or claiming some special status. It's about aligning your conscious awareness with the deeper reality of your being. It's about removing the veils of misperception that have hidden your true nature from yourself. The impact of this understanding ripples through every aspect of your life, from how you pray, to how you relate to others, to how you face life's inevitable challenges. Now, I want to explore a powerful metaphor that makes this truth impossible to misunderstand. A metaphor that completely transforms how you perceive your relationship with the divine source. Because once you truly grasp this principle, you'll never again approach spirituality from a mindset of separation and lack. If you're beginning to see your spiritual journey in a completely new light through this understanding, write in the comments, "I see my divine nature." Imagine the vast ocean with its countless waves rising and falling across its surface. Now, consider this revelation. A wave is not separate from the ocean trying desperately to become oceanic. It already is ocean temporarily expressing in wave form. The wave's entire existence, substance and power come directly from the ocean itself. Its very being is oceanic in nature, regardless of its temporary appearance as a distinct form. Click the subscribe button now to continue this journey of spiritual awakening as we explore what it truly means to live from the understanding that you are God's. This metaphor isn't merely a beautiful analogy. It's a profound revelation about the nature of reality itself and your place within it. You are not a human being trying to reach God through spiritual practices, perfect behavior, or religious devotion. You are divine life, temporarily expressing in human form. The boundary we perceive between humanity and divinity exists only in our perception, not in the fundamental nature of reality. The wave doesn't need to strive or struggle to become more oceanic. It simply needs to recognize what it already is. Similarly, your spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what you've always been beneath the surface-level identity that feels separate and limited. Behind the scenes of this misperception is what Joel Goldsmith, one of the great mystical teachers of the 20th century, identified as the root cause of all human suffering: the belief in separation. This single misunderstanding creates a mindset that generates endless pain, anxiety, and limitation in our lives. Think about this revelation for a moment. The primary source of our suffering, our sense of lack, our feeling of isolation, all stem from this one misperception that we are somehow separate from our divine source. When you begin living from the consciousness that the divine is your actual source and substance, not just poetically or metaphorically, but literally, everything changes. The transformation is not just in your thinking, but in your entire experience of life. You stop approaching your spiritual journey from a mindset of scarcity and separation. You stop begging and pleading for what you need, as though addressing some distant deity who might or might not respond. Instead, you start receiving, naturally recognizing that what you need is already present within the divine flow of your being. This shift in awareness creates a profound impact in how you navigate life's challenges. You stop efforting and struggling against the current of life, and you start allowing the divine nature to flow through you naturally and effortlessly. This doesn't mean your human life suddenly becomes problem-free, but rather that you approach those problems from an entirely different state of consciousness. The decisions you make from this place of understanding create entirely different results than those made from a consciousness of separation. Now, I want to explore what happens when this profound understanding begins to shape your everyday practices, particularly in how you approach prayer. Because the practical power of this realization becomes crystal clear when you're facing life's inevitable challenges and difficulties. If you've experienced moments of this profound sense of oneness, even briefly type "I am ocean, not just wave" in the comments below. Consider the stark contrast in how prayer transforms when you truly grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's." A person who perceives divinity as distant and separate naturally prays from that mindset. "Please God, help me with this problem." Their entire approach stems from a consciousness of separation, lack, and dependency on an external power. It's the prayer of someone who fundamentally sees themselves as cut off from the divine source, but someone who has awakened to the truth that Jesus revealed prays in an entirely different way. Their prayer isn't about begging an external deity for intervention. It's about recognizing what's already present. They acknowledge that divine wisdom isn't something distant they need to acquire or convince to help them. It's already present within as their true nature and inheritance. This revelation completely revolutionizes the prayer experience. Prayer evolves from a desperate plea to a powerful recognition. It becomes less about asking and more about acknowledging what already is. This mindset shift doesn't just change your words, it alters the entire energy and effectiveness of your spiritual connection. The hidden truth behind Jesus' healing ministry reveals this principle in action. When we examine how Jesus approached healing, we discover something remarkable. He never begged God to intervene from some distant heaven. He never pleaded for divine assistance as though it was separate from him. Instead, he simply acknowledged the divine presence right there in the situation. Jesus recognized a fundamental principle. Where divine presence is acknowledged, wholeness must naturally express. Where divinity flows unobstructed by beliefs in separation, the expression of that divinity is already complete by the very nature of the relationship itself. This wasn't miraculous in the way we typically think. It was the natural manifestation of spiritual law working through someone who fully understood his divine identity. Behind the scenes of every healing Jesus performed was this recognition of divine presence, not as something to be called down from heaven, but as the very substance and reality of the person standing before him. He saw beyond the appearance of disease or limitation to the divine reality that was always present, but obscured by human belief in separation. This journey of revelation isn't about acquiring special powers or becoming superhuman. It's about removing the veils of misperception that have hidden your true nature from yourself. When you begin to grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's," healing becomes less about fixing something broken and more about revealing the wholeness that was never actually lost. The transformation that occurs when you approach prayer from this understanding is profound. Rather than approaching the divine as a beggar hoping for help, you approach as one who recognizes their inheritance. The energy shifts from desperate pleading to peaceful acknowledgement. The entire experience changes from anxiety to assurance, from uncertainty to recognition. Let me share what makes this understanding so powerful in your everyday experience. Divine resources aren't something you need to hunt down, earn, or convince to come your way. They're your inheritance through the simple fact of relationship. If you've ever experienced a moment where simply shifting your perception transformed a situation without any external change occurring, write "perception is everything" in the comments. Just as a child naturally inherits traits and resources from their parents without having to beg for them, you naturally have access to divine qualities through your essential connection to the source. This principle of divine inheritance transforms our entire understanding of how spiritual resources flow into our lives. For your entire life, you've likely been taught to seek God's help as if you were fundamentally separated from divine supply. This seeking mindset creates an endless spiritual quest, always reaching for something that seems just beyond your grasp. But here's the breakthrough revelation that changes everything about your spiritual journey. Divine wisdom isn't something you need to hunt down, earn through spiritual merit, or convince to come your way. It's your inheritance through the simple fact of relationship. Divine peace isn't a distant quality that might flow to you. Someday, if you're worthy enough, it's already flowing through you right now as your true nature. The same applies to every divine quality: abundance, creativity, love, strength, and intelligence. These aren't external resources you need to somehow acquire. They're already present within your being as your divine inheritance. When this understanding truly takes root in your consciousness, your entire prayer life undergoes a remarkable transformation. It evolves from begging into recognition, from anxious effort into restful knowing, from desperate pleading into peaceful receiving. However, this profound truth requires realistic expectations about how this transformation manifests in your experience. People who embrace this understanding often expect immediate physical results or instant miracles in their circumstances. But here's the crucial insight that prevents disappointment on this journey. This recognition of your divine nature doesn't always produce immediate physical results or instant miracles. What it does produce is an immediate shift in consciousness that then gradually manifests in your outer experience over time. Consider how a seed transforms into a plant. The moment the seed is planted and watered, its transformation begins, but invisibly beneath the surface. For days, sometimes weeks, nothing appears to be happening, but profound changes are occurring at the invisible level before any visible growth appears. Your spiritual awakening follows this same natural pattern. The inner transformation precedes the outer manifestation. Your consciousness shifts first, and then your circumstances begin to reflect that shift. The timeline varies for each person and situation, but the principle remains constant. This understanding helps you avoid the discouragement that comes from expecting instant results, while still maintaining complete faith in the process. This is realistic spirituality, not magical thinking that promises overnight transformation. The journey unfolds naturally, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, depending on how deeply ingrained the patterns of separation consciousness have been in your life. But the trajectory is always the same: inner awakening gradually reshaping outer experience. When this revelation becomes your living consciousness rather than just an intellectual concept, you stop operating from fear-based decisions and begin living from divine assurance. Your actions flow from a completely different source, not from the desperate need to get something you lack, but from the overflow of what you already possess in your divine nature. Let me share a powerful practice that helps anchor this recognition in your daily consciousness. Because this journey isn't just theoretical, it's meant to transform how you experience every aspect of your life from the inside out. If you've experienced a situation where inner transformation led to outer changes in your life, type "inner creates outer" in the comments below. Now I want to explore what might be the most profound dimension of understanding Jesus' declaration, "You are God's." The radical recognition that you inherit divine nature, not human limitation. This revelation completely transforms what you believe is your natural state of being. Most of us have been conditioned to accept limitation, lack, struggle, and fear as our default human condition. We've been taught that we must strive and struggle to acquire qualities like peace, wisdom, love, and abundance. We approach these divine qualities as if they're distant treasures that only the spiritually elite might eventually attain after years of devoted practice. But this revolutionary understanding flips that entire paradigm. Peace is not something distant that you must acquire through years of spiritual practice or struggle. It is your inheritance, your natural state as divine expression. Wisdom is not something you fundamentally lack that must be painfully accumulated. It is your birthright flowing naturally from your divine nature. The same applies to every divine quality: abundance, joy, love, creativity, and strength. These aren't external resources you need to somehow convince to enter your experience. They're already flowing through you as your true nature, often obscured by beliefs in separation and limitation. This perspective creates a complete mindset revolution. When this realization becomes your living consciousness rather than just an intellectual concept, you stop operating from fear-based decisions and begin living from divine assurance. Your actions flow from a completely different source, not from the desperate need to get something you lack, but from the overflow of what you already possess in your divine nature. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a fundamental shift in identity. You no longer see yourself primarily as a limited human personality struggling to connect with divinity. Instead, you recognize yourself as divine expression, temporarily experiencing human form. This doesn't make you arrogant or separate you from humanity. It actually connects you more deeply with all life by recognizing the same divine presence expressing through everyone and everything. But this profound truth requires more than intellectual understanding. It needs to become your lived experience. That's where practical application becomes essential. Let me share a powerful practice that helps anchor this recognition in your daily consciousness. Begin by sitting quietly each morning for just 10-15 minutes before your day unfolds. This isn't complicated meditation requiring special techniques. It's simply quiet recognition. The revolutionary aspect is that you don't ask God for anything during this time. Instead, you simply acknowledge the truth. I am divine expression right now. My breath, my consciousness, my very being in this moment is divine life expressing. As thoughts of problems, concerns, or limitations naturally arise, don't fight them or try to suppress them. Instead, gently return to recognition. Divine presence is my true nature. Whatever appears as challenge or lack in my human experience, the divine reality of wholeness and abundance is present now as the truth of my being. This practice isn't about creating something new. It's about recognizing what already is. You're not trying to manufacture divine qualities through affirmation or visualization. You're acknowledging the reality that exists beneath the appearance of limitation. This distinction makes all the difference in the effectiveness of your spiritual practice. Let me share another powerful practice that transforms how you move through your daily life while living from this recognition of your divine nature. Because the journey of awakening isn't limited to your quiet morning moments, it extends into every aspect of your life experience. If you've tried positive thinking techniques without lasting results, comment below with recognition over affirmation to share how this approach feels different to you throughout your day, particularly in those moments when you feel yourself straining against circumstances or becoming anxious about situations. There's a powerful practice that can create an immediate shift in your experience. I call it the pause practice, and it's deceptively simple yet profound in its impact. When you notice yourself feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, or anxious about any situation, pause for just a moment. Take one conscious breath, then silently acknowledge this truth. Divine intelligence is operating in this situation right now. This simple practice creates a remarkable shift in your experience. You'll literally feel yourself releasing the weight of trying to control outcomes through limited human will alone. This momentary pause and recognition interrupts the habitual pattern of separation consciousness that creates so much unnecessary suffering in our lives. Think of it as a pattern. Interrupt that shifts you from the limited human perspective to the broader divine perspective in an instant. This isn't about denying or ignoring real challenges. It's about approaching them from a completely different level of consciousness. The breakthrough happens when you realize you don't have to solve every problem through human effort alone. There is a higher intelligence, a divine wisdom that is already operating in every situation when you step aside and allow it to flow. A woman named Sarah practiced this during a particularly stressful work situation where everything seemed to be falling apart. Instead of pushing harder with human will and getting more frustrated, she paused several times throughout the day to acknowledge, divine intelligence is operating here right now. Within hours, solutions began appearing that no one had considered. This wasn't coincidence. It was the natural result of shifting from separation consciousness to recognition of divine presence. Now I want to reveal what might be the most profound dimension of living from the understanding that you are God's. Learning to live from cause rather than effect. In essence, this means training yourself to recognize that your divine nature is the invisible reality behind all visible forms and circumstances in your life. When you look at your bank account, practice seeing beyond the numbers, which are just effects, to the infinite substance that is your true source, which is cause. When you look at your body, see beyond the appearance to the divine life that animates it. This isn't denial of human reality, it's recognition of a deeper dimension that is equally real, but usually overlooked. This perspective revolutionizes how you respond to circumstances. Instead of constantly reacting to effects, the visible conditions and circumstances that appear in your life, you learn to live from consciousness of cause, the divine reality that precedes and produces those outer conditions. This journey of revelation shifts you from being a victim of circumstances to being consciously aligned with the creative principle that shapes reality. Living from this level of consciousness doesn't make you passive or unrealistic about practical matters. You still take appropriate human action, but those actions now stem from a completely different awareness. They flow from recognition rather than reaction, from abundance rather than scarcity, from trust rather than fear. This creates a fundamental transformation in the quality and effectiveness of everything you do. As we begin to live from this profound understanding that Jesus revealed, something remarkable happens in our experience. The spiritual journey that once felt like an uphill battle transforms into a natural unfolding of your divine nature. You begin to approach life not as a separate entity struggling to connect with divinity, but as divine expression having a human experience. If you've ever experienced a moment where shifting your perception of a situation completely transformed your experience without the situation itself changing, comment, "I've witnessed the power of perception" below. I share these teachings because I've witnessed their transformative power both in my own life and in the lives of countless others who have embraced this understanding. When you truly grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's," something remarkable happens. The spiritual journey that once felt like an uphill battle transforms into a natural unfolding of your divine nature. You approach life not as a separate entity struggling to connect with divinity, but as divine expression having a human experience. This revelation doesn't make life perfect or problem-free, but it fundamentally changes how you experience those challenges. You face them from recognition of wholeness rather than from a sense of separation and lack. And this makes all the difference. If this message resonated with you today, if you felt something stir within you, As we explored what Jesus truly meant, I'd love to hear from you. Simply comment, "This truth awakens something in me, so I know this message found the right heart." If you found value in these insights, gently tap that like button. It helps others discover these transformative teachings who might be seeking exactly this understanding right now. And if you're not already part of our community, I invite you to subscribe and join us on this journey of spiritual awakening. Each week, we explore these profound truths that liberate us from limitation and reveal our divine nature. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how to apply this divine recognition in healing work. Click and continue with me there as we uncover more of what it means to live from the consciousness that you are God's.
Joel Goldsmith discovered something that changes everything about that famous Bible verse. When Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free," he wasn't talking about information. He was revealing the most powerful spiritual practice ever given to humanity. Most people treat this as inspiration, but Joel showed it's actually an instruction manual for consciousness transformation. The word know in the original teaching means direct spiritual realization, not intellectual understanding. It's the difference between reading about water and drinking it. When you truly know the truth in the mystical sense, something shifts in your consciousness that cannot be reversed. This knowing dissolves every limitation, every fear, every false belief that has imprisoned you. Here's what Joel discovered. The truth that sets you free isn't a concept you learn. It's a presence you recognize within your own consciousness. This truth is already complete, already whole, already operating. Your only work is recognition, not acquisition. When you stop seeking truth outside yourself and start recognizing it within, freedom becomes your natural state, not a distant goal. The freedom Jesus spoke about isn't freedom from circumstances. Joel taught that real freedom is freedom from the belief that circumstances have power over your spiritual identity. You can be physically imprisoned, yet spiritually free, or physically free, yet mentally imprisoned. This understanding revolutionizes everything because it places freedom where it actually belongs, in consciousness itself. Most spiritual seekers make a critical mistake. They try to change their external world to feel free, but Joel revealed that freedom isn't a condition you create. It's a truth you recognize. The moment you know that your true nature is already free, untouched by any human condition, circumstances lose their grip. This isn't positive thinking or denial. It's recognizing what's eternally true about your spiritual being. This practice requires daily recognition, not occasional inspiration. Joel would spend hours in meditation simply recognizing the truth of being, not affirming it, not visualizing it, but resting in the recognition that consciousness itself is already free, whole, and complete. This recognition gradually dissolves the mental patterns that created your sense of limitation. Let me show you exactly how this recognition practice works. You don't start by trying to feel free or become free. You start by recognizing this truth. The I that I am is already the fullness of God expressed. Not will be, not can be, but already is. This isn't affirmation. It's recognition of what exists before you even think about it. When a problem appears, your habitual response is to fix it, fight it, or pray for it to change. Joel's approach is radically different. You pause and recognize, this appearance has no power to change the truth of my being. You're not denying the appearance. You're recognizing that it cannot alter your spiritual identity. This recognition creates an inner stillness where transformation naturally occurs. Practice this throughout your day. When anxiety appears, instead of trying to calm yourself, recognize the truth. I am that which cannot be anxious. When lack appears, recognize, I am the consciousness of infinite supply. You're not creating these truths. You're recognizing what's already established in consciousness. This is the knowing that sets you free, and it operates through recognition, never through effort. Joel emphasized that this practice unfolds gradually, not instantly. In the beginning, recognition may feel mechanical or intellectual. You might practice for weeks and still feel trapped by circumstances. This is normal. You're retraining consciousness to rest in truth rather than react to appearances. The recognition deepens naturally as you persist, moving from mental exercise to lived experience. The freedom that emerges isn't dramatic or emotional. It's a quiet inner stability that remains present regardless of external chaos. You notice that situations that once devastated you now barely register, not because you're suppressing feelings, but because you've recognized a deeper truth that circumstances cannot touch. This is the freedom Jesus meant, and it's available through patient, consistent recognition. Some practitioners experience shifts within weeks. Others need months of daily practice. The timeline doesn't matter because the practice itself is the freedom. You're not practicing to become free someday. You're practicing the recognition that consciousness is already free right now. Every moment of recognition strengthens your awareness of this truth until it becomes your permanent state of being, not just a temporary experience. Olivia spent 30 years in corporate leadership, outwardly successful but inwardly imprisoned by constant anxiety about performance. She discovered Joel's teachings and began the recognition practice hesitantly. For the first month, nothing seemed to change. Her anxiety persisted, her sleep remained disrupted, her mind raced with worst-case scenarios about every business decision. But Olivia committed to the practice anyway. Each morning before work, she'd spend 20 minutes simply recognizing, "The I that I am cannot be threatened." She didn't try to believe it or feel it. She just recognized it as truth. During anxious moments throughout the day, she'd pause and silently recognize that her true nature was untouched by any business outcome, any colleague's opinion, any market condition. Around week 6, Olivia noticed something subtle. During a board meeting where she was being questioned aggressively, a strange calm emerged. Not forced calm, but an inner knowing that nothing happening in that room could actually diminish her. The anxiety was still present in her body, but there was now a deeper awareness watching it, unmoved by it. This was the beginning of freedom emerging through recognition, not through changed circumstances. David's story reveals how this practice works with physical challenges. Diagnosed with a chronic condition that doctors said was permanent, he felt imprisoned by his body's limitations. Traditional prayer hadn't helped, positive thinking felt hollow, and he was losing hope. Then he encountered Joel's teaching on recognition and decided to approach his situation completely differently. Instead of praying for healing, David began recognizing the truth of his spiritual being. I am consciousness, not body. The truth of my being is wholeness itself. This wasn't denial of his condition, it was recognition of a deeper reality. He practiced this recognition multiple times daily, not to make his body heal, but simply because the recognition itself felt like truth emerging. Over 3 months, David's symptoms began shifting. Not dramatically at first, just subtle improvements his doctors couldn't explain. More importantly, his relationship with his body transformed. The condition no longer defined him because he'd recognized his true identity as consciousness itself. Whether the body improved or not, he'd found the freedom Jesus promised. The physical healing that followed was secondary to the consciousness shift that had already liberated him. Rachel's transformation shows how recognition works with relationships. Her marriage was failing, filled with resentment and disappointment. She'd tried everything: counseling, communication techniques, even separation. Nothing worked because she was trying to change her husband rather than recognize truth. When she found Joel's teachings, she reluctantly tried a completely different approach. Rachel stopped trying to fix her marriage and started recognizing spiritual truth. The person before me is consciousness appearing as form. I am consciousness recognizing itself. This felt strange initially, especially when her husband was being difficult, but she persisted, recognizing truth rather than reacting to behavior. Something began shifting in her perception, not in his behavior. After several weeks of consistent recognition practice, Rachel noticed her husband responding differently. He was actually the same, but her recognition of his true spiritual nature somehow allowed his better qualities to emerge. The marriage didn't become perfect, but it became workable because Rachel had found freedom from her judgmental perceptions. She'd discovered that knowing the truth about spiritual identity actually does set you free from relationship imprisonment. Thomas found this practice during a financial crisis that threatened everything he'd built. His business was collapsing, debts were mounting, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Desperate, he began Joel's recognition practice, even though it seemed irrelevant to his practical crisis. He'd recognize, I am the consciousness of infinite supply, not as affirmation, but as recognition of spiritual truth. For 2 months, his external situation continued deteriorating while he practiced recognition daily. This was his dark night, where the practice seemed useless against harsh reality. But Thomas persisted because the recognition itself brought a strange peace that circumstances couldn't touch. He was discovering freedom in the midst of crisis, not after the crisis ended. Then opportunities began appearing that Thomas couldn't have predicted or planned. A former colleague offered partnership in a new venture. An unexpected settlement came through. Within 6 months, Thomas had completely rebuilt his financial life, but more importantly, he'd discovered that his true security was consciousness itself, not bank accounts. The recognition had set him free from financial fear permanently. If these transformation stories show you a different way of spiritual practice, like this video to help others discover Joel's wisdom, subscribe for more consciousness teachings that actually transform, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your current journey. Joel taught a powerful companion practice he called recognizing the invisible. While you're recognizing truth about yourself, you simultaneously recognize that an invisible spiritual reality is operating beyond what your senses report. This isn't imagination or visualization. It's acknowledging that more is present than what appears. This dual recognition creates what Joel called the atmosphere of consciousness, where transformation occurs naturally. Practice this by pausing several times daily and recognizing, there is an invisible divine presence operating in this moment that my eyes cannot see. You're not creating this presence through recognition. You're acknowledging what's already here. This shifts your awareness from visible effects to invisible cause. The more you recognize the invisible, the more its activity becomes evident in your visible experience. This recognition is especially powerful during difficult circumstances. When everything visible says failure, lack, or limitation, you pause and recognize the invisible divine reality operating beneath appearances. This isn't denial or escapism. It's training consciousness to recognize the deeper dimension where solutions already exist. Joel found that people who practiced this recognition experienced what others called miracles, though he understood them as natural spiritual law. Another technique Joel emphasized is what he called impersonalization. When someone seems to be causing you problems, you practice recognizing that you're not dealing with a person, you're dealing with an impersonal belief appearing as that person. This recognition removes personal judgment and allows you to see the spiritual truth behind the human behavior. It's incredibly freeing. Here's how to practice it. When someone irritates or threatens you, silently recognize, this is not a person acting against me. This is an impersonal belief of separation appearing. You're recognizing that the troublesome behavior isn't personal. It's a universal false belief temporarily operating through that individual. This recognition dissolves resentment and opens space for truth to appear. Joel discovered that impersonalization also applies to yourself. When you're experiencing negative emotions or destructive patterns, recognize, this isn't the real me. This is an impersonal belief temporarily operating. This recognition prevents self-condemnation and allows you to address the belief rather than battle yourself. Freedom comes through recognizing what's impersonal rather than making everything personal and taking it into your identity. Joel's third complementary technique is resting in the Word. After you've practiced recognition, spend time in complete silence, resting in the truth you've recognized. This isn't meditation with a goal. It's simply being present with the truth without thought or effort. In this rest, the truth you recognized begins integrating into consciousness at levels deeper than intellect can reach. The practice is simple but profound. After your morning recognition practice, sit in silence for 10 to 20 minutes. No mantras, no visualizations, no trying to feel anything. Just rest in the awareness that truth is already established in consciousness. If thoughts arise, gently return to resting. This rest is where the actual transformation happens because you're allowing truth to do its work without interference. Joel taught that most people practice spiritually, but never rest spiritually. They're always seeking, always working, always trying to achieve. But truth doesn't need your effort to be true. It needs your recognition and then your rest. In the rest, consciousness assimilates the recognition and it becomes lived experience rather than intellectual knowledge. This rest is essential for the knowing that actually sets you free. The fourth technique is living from recognition. Throughout your day, let every action flow from the recognition you've practiced rather than from human planning or willpower. This means before speaking, you pause and recognize truth. Before making decisions, you recognize truth. Before responding to challenges, you recognize truth. Your entire life becomes an expression of recognized truth rather than reaction to appearances. This isn't about perfection, it's about direction. You'll forget and react habitually many times daily. When you notice this, simply recognize truth again without self-judgment. The practice is training consciousness to make recognition your default response to life rather than fear, desire, or calculation. Over time, this becomes natural, and your entire experience shifts from human effort to spiritual flow. Joel emphasized that these four techniques work together. Recognition identifies truth. Acknowledging the invisible expands your awareness of where truth operates. Impersonalization removes personal barriers to truth. Resting allows truth to integrate, and living from recognition makes truth practical. Together, they create what Joel called the consciousness of truth that actually sets you free from every human limitation. The first major challenge you'll face is the nothing's happening phase. You practice recognition faithfully for weeks, and your circumstances remain unchanged. Your mind screams that this isn't working, that you're wasting time, that you need practical action instead of spiritual practice. This is where most people abandon the path, and it's exactly where persistence becomes crucial. Joel warned about this phase explicitly. He taught that consciousness transformation happens in dimensions you cannot perceive with your senses. Just because your external world looks the same doesn't mean nothing is shifting. The recognition practice is working at the level of consciousness itself, dissolving false beliefs and establishing truth. This inner work must happen before outer changes appear. The solution is consistency without attachment to timeline. Commit to 90 days of recognition practice regardless of visible results. Joel found that 3 months of daily practice is usually when the inner shift becomes strong enough to manifest externally. But your practice cannot depend on results, or you're still trapped in cause and effect thinking. Practice because recognizing truth is its own freedom, whether circumstances change today or 6 months from now. The second challenge is what Joel called the warfare of the carnal mind. As you practice recognition of truth, your habitual thought patterns fight back aggressively. Doubt intensifies, fear becomes louder, negative thoughts multiply. This isn't failure. It's actually evidence that your recognition practice is working. The false belief system is defending itself because it senses its dissolution approaching. During this phase, you might experience intense resistance to your practice. You'll find every excuse to skip your recognition time. You'll feel foolish doing it. You'll hear inner voices mocking the entire approach. Joel taught that this warfare is temporary but intense. The key is recognizing that these thoughts are impersonal, not personal. They're the old consciousness pattern resisting the new truth you're establishing. Push through this warfare with compassionate firmness toward yourself. When resistance arises, recognize. This resistance has no power to stop truth from being truth. Don't fight the thoughts, don't suppress them. Simply recognize their temporary appearances while truth is eternal reality. This phase typically lasts 2 to 4 weeks of daily practice, after which a noticeable peace emerges. The third challenge involves isolation and misunderstanding. As you practice Joel's teachings, people around you won't understand your approach. They'll offer advice that contradicts recognition practice. They'll think you're being passive or in denial. Some relationships may become strained because your consciousness shift makes others uncomfortable. This social pressure can undermine your commitment if you're not prepared for it. Joel experienced this himself. His mystical approach puzzled traditional religious people and seemed impractical to materialists. He learned to practice silently without defending or explaining unless someone genuinely wanted to understand. Your recognition practice is personal between you and truth. It doesn't require anyone else's approval or understanding. Let your transformed life be your testimony, not your words. The solution is finding community, even if virtual, with others practicing consciousness transformation. Joel's students formed study groups where they could share experiences without judgment. Today you can find online communities exploring these teachings. Having even one person who understands this path makes the social challenge much easier. But ultimately, your commitment must be strong enough to practice alone if necessary. The fourth challenge is the temptation to return to traditional prayer when crisis hits. You're practicing recognition consistently, then a major crisis erupts. Every instinct screams to petition, beg, or bargain with God for help. The recognition practice suddenly seems inadequate for the emergency at hand. This is the test that determines whether you've truly understood Joel's teaching or just added it to old patterns. Joel taught that crisis is exactly when recognition practice matters most. When you're tempted to return to petitionary prayer, that's your opportunity to prove to yourself that you trust truth over appearances. Instead of begging God to change circumstances, you recognize the truth that God, being infinite consciousness, is already all that exists. This recognition in crisis is advanced practice, but it's where real freedom emerges. The way through is remembering that recognition isn't passive. It's the most powerful spiritual activity because it aligns your consciousness with reality itself. When crisis appears, increase your recognition practice rather than abandoning it. Recognize truth more frequently, rest in truth more deeply, live from truth more consistently. This is how you discover that truth actually does set you free, even in circumstances that seem impossible. If these challenge-breaking insights resonate with your spiritual journey, like to support this teaching, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith practices that work in real life, and comment which challenge you're ready to transform through recognition right now. Linda's advanced case shows how recognition practice works with chronic pain that doctors couldn't resolve. After a year of Joel's practices, she'd experienced some relief, but the pain persisted daily. Instead of seeing this as failure, Linda deepened her recognition practice by adding a crucial element. She began recognizing that pain itself was trying to teach her something about the nature of consciousness. Rather than resisting pain or trying to recognize it away, Linda practiced recognizing truth while fully present with the sensation. She'd sit with the pain and recognize, I am the consciousness observing the sensation, not the sensation itself. This subtle shift changed everything. She wasn't denying pain or fighting it. She was recognizing her true identity as awareness itself, which cannot be harmed by any sensation it observes. Over 6 months, Linda's relationship with pain transformed completely. The intensity decreased gradually, but more importantly, pain no longer controlled her life even when present. She'd discovered what Joel meant by freedom. She could feel pain and simultaneously be free because she'd recognized her true nature as consciousness itself. This is advanced practice that transforms suffering into a doorway to deeper recognition of truth. Michael's situation involved business competition that threatened his company's survival. A larger competitor was systematically trying to destroy his business through aggressive tactics. His initial recognition practice focused on his own consciousness, which helped his anxiety. But the external threat continued. He realized he needed to apply Joel's teaching about recognizing truth in others, even enemies. Michael began an advanced practice of recognizing the truth about his competitor, not their behavior, but their spiritual identity. He'd spend time daily recognizing that consciousness appearing as my competitor is the same one consciousness appearing as me. This felt almost impossible initially because his human sense wanted to demonize them. But Joel taught that truth is universal, not selective. After 3 months of this advanced recognition, something unexpected happened. The competitor's tactics began backfiring in ways Michael couldn't have orchestrated. Opportunities emerged that his competitor couldn't match. But the deeper transformation was in Michael himself. He discovered that recognizing truth about others is recognizing truth about consciousness itself. When you see only one consciousness appearing as all people, competition becomes cooperation at a level beyond human understanding. Isabella's advanced case involved her teenage daughter's rebellion that was tearing their family apart. Traditional parenting approaches failed, therapy seemed useless, and Isabella felt completely helpless. She'd been practicing Joel's recognition for herself with good results, but applying it to her daughter felt different. How do you recognize truth when someone you love is making destructive choices? Joel's teaching on impersonalization became crucial here. Isabella practiced recognizing that her daughter's rebellion wasn't personal, it was an impersonal belief of separation temporarily operating. She stopped trying to control or fix her daughter, and instead recognized the truth. My daughter's true nature is divine consciousness, regardless of current behavior. This recognition was daily, multiple times, especially during conflicts. The breakthrough came gradually over 8 months. Isabella noticed her own reactions changing first. She could remain calm during daughter's outbursts because she was seeing beyond behavior to truth. This calm presence created space for her daughter to make different choices. The rebellion didn't disappear overnight, but slowly, genuine connection returned. Isabella discovered that recognizing truth about loved ones gives them room to discover it themselves. James faced the ultimate test. Terminal diagnosis with months to live. He'd practiced Joel's teachings for years, but this was the moment when everything theoretical became practical. Death isn't something you can avoid with recognition practice, but Joel taught that even death cannot touch your true spiritual nature. James decided to use his remaining time to discover if this was actually true. His recognition practice became intense and focused. I am consciousness itself, which has no beginning and no end. This body is temporary, but the I that I am is eternal. James wasn't in denial about his physical condition. He was recognizing a deeper truth about existence. He spent hours daily in recognition and rest, going deeper into the truth of being than he'd ever gone before. What James discovered transformed not just him, but everyone around him. As his body weakened, his consciousness grew stronger and clearer. He experienced a freedom and peace that medical personnel called remarkable. He wasn't afraid because he'd recognized through direct experience that consciousness itself cannot die. His body passed, but James had proven to himself that truth actually does set you free, even from the ultimate human fear. His testimony inspired dozens to take this path seriously. After months or years of recognition practice, something shifts permanently in consciousness. You realize you're no longer practicing to become free. You're practicing from freedom. The truth you've been recognizing is now your lived experience, not just an intellectual concept. This doesn't mean problems disappear. It means your relationship with problems transforms completely. They no longer define you or control you. This permanent shift feels like waking up from a dream. You see clearly that you were never actually imprisoned by circumstances. You were imprisoned by believing circumstances had power over your spiritual identity. That belief is gone, dissolved through consistent recognition of truth. What remains is quiet certainty that your true nature is untouchable by any human condition. This is the freedom Jesus promised, and Joel revealed how to access. People at this stage often describe feeling like they're living in a different world, though externally, everything looks the same. The difference is internal. There's a constant awareness of truth operating beneath appearances. Challenges still arise, but they're met with recognition rather than fear. This consciousness becomes self-sustaining because recognizing truth is now your natural response to life, not something you have to remember to do. The transformation extends into every area of life organically. Your relationships improve because you're recognizing truth about everyone you meet. Your work becomes more effective because you're operating from consciousness rather than anxiety. Your health often improves because your body is no longer carrying the burden of false beliefs. Even your creative expression expands because consciousness itself is infinitely creative. But Joel warned against making these improvements the goal. They're natural byproducts of consciousness transformation, not objectives to pursue. The moment you practice recognition to get better circumstances, you've fallen back into cause and effect thinking. True freedom is recognizing that consciousness is already complete regardless of circumstances. The improvements come because consciousness expressing freely naturally creates harmonious conditions. This is why some practitioners experience dramatic life changes while others experience subtle shifts. The external changes don't measure your spiritual progress. What matters is whether you've recognized your true identity as consciousness itself. That recognition is the freedom, the transformation, the goal. Everything else is just consciousness expressing in form, and form is always changing. Your freedom cannot depend on form. It must rest in the recognition of truth itself. Living from this transformed consciousness means you become what Joel called a transparency for truth. You're no longer trying to demonstrate truth or prove it works. You simply recognize truth and let it flow through you naturally. This makes you incredibly effective in the world because you're not operating from ego or fear. You're allowing consciousness itself to direct your actions. This stage requires ongoing recognition practice, not because you're incomplete, but because recognition itself is the joy and purpose of spiritual life. You're not maintaining your freedom through practice, you're expressing your freedom as practice. The difference is subtle, but crucial. You practice because recognizing truth is what consciousness does naturally when it's awake to itself. Joel taught that at this stage, your life becomes your message. You don't need to teach or preach unless called to do so. Your presence, your actions, your responses to life naturally demonstrate what it means to know the truth. Others feel the freedom in you even if they can't articulate it. You become a living demonstration that Jesus' promise is real. Knowing the truth actually does set you free, completely and permanently. Here's the ultimate truth Joel wanted everyone to understand. You are already free. The truth isn't something you achieve through practice. It's what you are beneath all false beliefs. Recognition practice doesn't create freedom. It removes the obstacles that prevented you from experiencing the freedom that's already present. This is the great secret hidden in Jesus' words. Your journey forward is simple but profound. Practice recognition daily, not to become something you're not, but to remember what you are. When challenges appear, recognize truth instead of reacting from fear. When others suffer, recognize their true nature as consciousness itself. When success comes, recognize it's consciousness expressing, not personal achievement. Let every moment be an opportunity to recognize truth. The freedom Joel discovered through Jesus' teaching is available to you right now. Not someday after enough practice, but now through recognition of what's already true. You are consciousness itself, appearing as individual form. That consciousness is free, whole, complete, and untouchable by any human condition. Know this truth not intellectually but through direct recognition, and you will be free indeed. This is Joel's gift to you, and it works for anyone willing to practice recognition consistently. If your spiritual consciousness expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video to help others find this path, subscribe for more transformative mystical Christianity teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to declare your commitment to recognition practice starting today. Most people recite the 23rd Psalm as a prayer of hope, a plea for divine intervention. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something revolutionary. This ancient verse is not a request. It is a declaration of spiritual law already operating in your consciousness right now. The Lord is your shepherd means the divine presence is already caring for you this very moment, not tomorrow or after you pray harder. When you truly understand that the Lord is your shepherd, you stop begging and start recognizing. You cease asking God to provide and begin acknowledging that divine substance is already flowing through your life. This shifts everything. Your consciousness moves from lack to abundance, from fear to peace, from hoping to knowing. This is not positive thinking. This is spiritual realization. The difference between prayer and realization changes your entire experience. Prayer often comes from a sense of separation, asking an external God to fix your problems. Realization awakens you to the truth that divine presence is not separate from you. It is the very fabric of your being. You are not waiting for provision. You are living in it right now, whether you recognize it or not. Joel Goldsmith taught that most spiritual seekers miss the deepest meaning of Scripture. They read words but do not enter the consciousness behind them. The 23rd Psalm is not poetry for comfort. It is a technical manual for living in spiritual consciousness. Every phrase describes a state of awareness where divine law operates automatically, without human effort or manipulation. Consider the phrase, "I shall not want." This is not a future promise dependent on your faith level. It describes the natural result of recognizing divine completeness now. When you truly know the Lord as your shepherd, want disappears from your consciousness, not because all your desires are fulfilled, but because you recognize the fullness of spiritual substance already present. This understanding transforms how you approach every challenge. Instead of treating problems as real conditions requiring divine intervention, you see them as invitations to deepen your realization. The problem is not out there in the world. The problem is the belief in separation from your source. Heal the consciousness, and the outer condition adjusts naturally. The secret Joel discovered was this: the 23rd Psalm works only when you stop using it as a prayer and start living it as your consciousness. You cannot petition your way into "I shall not want." You must realize the truth that creates that experience. Divine completeness is not something God gives you. It is what you are, spiritually speaking, right now in this moment. Most people approach spirituality backwards. They see a problem and then try to apply spiritual truth to fix it. But spiritual truth does not fix material problems. It dissolves the consciousness that created them. When you live in the awareness that the Lord is your shepherd, lack cannot exist in your experience, not because God suddenly provides, but because you stop creating lack through limited thinking. This is why affirmations and positive thinking often fail. They try to cover fear with hope, lack with wanting more. True spiritual practice reveals what is already true. You are not trying to attract abundance. You are removing the mental blocks that hide the abundance already flowing through divine consciousness, which is your true nature. Here is the practice Joel Goldsmith taught. Sit quietly and do not ask God for anything. Instead, acknowledge this truth. The Lord is my shepherd right now. Not tomorrow, not after I deserve it, but now. Let this realization settle into your consciousness. Feel the difference between begging and knowing. One comes from lack, the other from spiritual wholeness. As you rest in this awareness, notice how your thoughts about problems begin to shift. They lose their power. They become less solid, less urgent. This is not denial. This is seeing through the illusion to the spiritual reality underneath. Your true nature is already complete, already provided for, already sustained by infinite intelligence and love. Practice this daily, not as a technique to get things, but as a return to truth. The 23rd Psalm is not about sheep and pastures. It is about consciousness and spiritual law. When your consciousness rests in divine completeness, your experience must reflect that. This is not magic. This is the natural operation of spiritual principle that has always been true. A woman came to one of Joel's classes drowning in debt, facing eviction within 30 days. She had prayed the 23rd Psalm every morning for years, begging God to provide. Joel asked her a simple question. Do you really believe the Lord is your shepherd right now? Or are you hoping he will become your shepherd if you pray hard enough? She realized she had been treating the psalm as a magical formula, a spiritual lottery ticket. Joel taught her to stop praying it and start living it. For 2 weeks, she sat each morning acknowledging one truth. Divine substance is already caring for me this moment. She stopped looking at her bank account with fear. She stopped treating bills as proof of abandonment. Within 3 weeks, opportunities appeared that had always been there, but invisible to her fearful consciousness. A friend mentioned a job opening she was perfect for. A forgotten account was discovered with funds she had overlooked. Her landlord offered a payment plan she had never thought to request. The money did not fall from heaven. Her consciousness shifted, and solutions she could not see before became obvious. This was not miraculous intervention. This was spiritual law in operation. When consciousness changes, perception changes. When perception changes, action changes. When action changes, results change. The Lord was always her shepherd. She simply began recognizing it instead of denying it through her fear-based thinking. A businessman attended Joel's retreat after losing his company in a devastating lawsuit. He felt betrayed by God, abandoned after decades of faithful church attendance. Joel told him something shocking. God never abandoned you because God never responds to human conditions. Divine presence simply is. You cannot lose it any more than a wave can lose the ocean. The man struggled with this teaching. He wanted comfort, not spiritual principles. Joel was compassionate but firm. Your company did not fail because God withdrew support. It failed because you built it on material sense, human planning, personal willpower. These are sand foundations. When you build your life on spiritual consciousness, recognizing divine intelligence as your source, nothing can be taken from you. For 6 months, the man practiced a new way of being. Before every business decision, he paused to acknowledge, "The Lord is my shepherd." This was not a prayer for success. It was a reminder that divine intelligence was his true guide, not market trends or competitive strategies. His decisions became clearer, more intuitive, less driven by fear or greed. He rebuilt his business, but this time differently. Not bigger or more impressive, but more aligned with spiritual principle. He made less money but felt more peace. His relationships improved. His health returned. He realized he had lost his company but found his consciousness, and that trade was priceless. A mother brought her chronically ill child to Joel, desperate for healing. She had tried everything: doctors, alternative medicine, prayer groups. Nothing worked. Joel looked at her gently and asked, "Are you trying to heal your child, or are you willing to heal your consciousness about your child?" She did not understand at first. Joel explained that her child's body was not the problem. Her fear-saturated consciousness was creating a mental atmosphere of sickness around the child. Every worried thought, every fearful prayer, every desperate plea was reinforcing the very condition she wanted to eliminate. This was not blame. This was spiritual education. He taught her to sit beside her sleeping child each night and silently declare, "The Lord is your shepherd. You are not a sick body needing healing. You are spiritual consciousness, whole and complete right now." She did this for weeks, releasing her grip on the outcome, surrendering her need to fix what she now understood was not actually broken in spiritual reality. The child's symptoms began to ease within a month. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but progressively and naturally. Doctors found nothing medically different, yet the child grew stronger. The mother realized she had not healed her child. She had healed her own consciousness, and that shift created space for the child's natural wholeness to emerge. These stories reveal what Joel Goldsmith spent his life teaching. Spiritual law operates through consciousness, not through begging or bargaining with God. The 23rd Psalm is not a prayer of hope. It is a statement of truth that, when realized deeply, transforms every area of your life, not by changing external conditions, but by revealing what has always been true. You are not separate from your source. You are not waiting for divine provision. You are living in it right now. The moment you deeply realize this, everything shifts. Not because you finally convinced God to help you, but because you stopped blocking the natural flow of divine substance with your fearful, lack-based thinking. This is not a quick fix or a magic formula. This is a complete transformation of how you understand yourself and your relationship to the infinite. It requires patience, practice, and willingness to release old patterns. But those who commit to this path discover something extraordinary: peace that does not depend on circumstances and provision that flows from consciousness itself. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the basic realization that the Lord is your shepherd lies a deeper practice Joel called resting in the Word. This is not meditation as most people understand it. This is conscious dwelling in spiritual truth until it becomes your automatic response to every situation. You rest in the awareness of divine presence until fear cannot find a foothold in your mind. Here is how you practice this. When anxiety about money arises, do not fight it or deny it. Simply rest in the truth. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Do not say this to make the anxiety go away. Say it to return your consciousness to what is actually true beyond the temporary emotion. The anxiety may remain for a while, but you are no longer identified with it. When health concerns trouble you, rest in the truth. He makes me lie down in green pastures. This does not mean God will heal your body if you believe hard enough. It means your true nature is spiritual wholeness, and as you recognize this, the body tends to reflect it. Not always instantly, not always completely, but progressively and naturally over time. This resting is active, not passive. You are actively choosing truth over appearance, spiritual reality over material evidence. Each time you rest in the Word, you strengthen your consciousness. Each time you return to truth despite contrary circumstances, you deepen your realization until it becomes your living experience. Joel taught a complementary practice he called the thunderbolt of recognition. This is the sudden, powerful awareness that shatters illusion in a moment. You are worrying about a situation, caught in mental spinning, when suddenly a spiritual truth strikes your consciousness with force. This problem is not happening to the real me. My true nature is untouched by this appearance. This recognition does not come from thinking or reasoning. It comes from a deeper place, what Joel called the still small voice within. One moment you are identified with the problem, the next moment you see through it to the spiritual reality underneath. The external situation may not change immediately, but your relationship to it transforms completely. A student of Joel's experienced this during a financial crisis. He was calculating numbers, trying to figure out how to survive, when recognition struck him. I am not these numbers. I am spiritual consciousness, and consciousness cannot lack anything. The fear dissolved instantly, not because the money situation improved, but because he was no longer hypnotized by it. Practice listening for these moments of recognition. They often come when you stop trying to solve problems mentally and simply pause in silence. The thunderbolt cannot be forced, but you can create conditions for it by refusing to accept material appearances as final reality. Truth breaks through when consciousness is receptive. Another powerful technique Joel taught was recognizing the nature of God as your nature. Most people see God as separate, external, watching from a distance. Joel revealed that the qualities of God are the qualities of your true self. Infinite intelligence is not something God has. It is what you are spiritually. Divine love is not something you receive from God. It is your essence. Practice this recognition. If God is infinite abundance, and I am God's expression, then infinite abundance is my spiritual nature right now. Not something I will have, but what I am. This shifts you from seeking abundance to recognizing it. You stop trying to attract what you already are. You simply let the blocks to awareness dissolve. This is subtle but revolutionary. When you know divine intelligence as your true nature, you stop feeling stupid or inadequate. When you know divine love as your essence, you stop seeking approval from others. When you know divine substance as your spiritual reality, you stop fearing lack. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because your identity is no longer tied to circumstances. Joel warned, this takes practice. Your human mind has been conditioned for years to identify with limitation, lack, and separation. But every time you recognize your true nature, you weaken that conditioning. Over weeks and months, the truth becomes more real to you than the appearance. This is the goal of all spiritual practice. The final complementary practice is what Joel called living from the invisible. Most people live from the visible. What they see in their bank account, what the doctor says, what circumstances appear to dictate. Joel taught that spiritual consciousness lives from the invisible, the divine substance that is always present, always flowing, always sustaining, whether your eyes see it or not. This does not mean ignoring practical responsibilities. It means handling them from a consciousness rooted in spiritual reality rather than material fear. You pay your bills, but you do not let the numbers define your sense of security. You follow medical advice, but you do not let a diagnosis define your identity. You live in the world, but not from the world. Practice asking yourself throughout the day, am I living from the visible right now or from the invisible? If you are living from the visible, you will feel anxious, controlling, trying to manipulate outcomes. If you are living from the invisible, you will feel guided, peaceful, trusting that divine intelligence is operating even when you cannot see how. These complementary practices deepen your realization that the Lord is your shepherd. They are not separate techniques but different angles on the same truth. Use whichever one speaks to your consciousness in the moment. The goal is always the same: to shift from material sense to spiritual consciousness, from fear to realization, from seeking to knowing. Now we must address the challenges honestly, because spiritual practice is not always smooth. The first major obstacle is the gap between realization and demonstration. You may have a powerful moment of knowing that the Lord is your shepherd, truly feeling the truth of it, yet your circumstances do not immediately change. This gap frustrates many seekers and causes them to doubt the teaching. Joel was clear about this. Spiritual realization often takes time to manifest in the visible world. This is not because God is slow or the teaching is false. It is because your consciousness has layers. The surface realizes the truth, but deeper beliefs still operate from the old patterns. Transformation happens progressively as the realization penetrates every level of your awareness. Do not judge the truth by immediate results. That is living from the visible, not the invisible. Instead, notice the subtle shifts. You feel less anxious even though nothing changed. You have clearer thinking about the situation. Unexpected ideas come to you. You feel guided in ways you did not before. These are signs that consciousness is shifting, and outer change will follow. The practice during this gap is to maintain your realization despite contrary appearances. This strengthens your consciousness immensely. Every time you choose truth over appearance, you are building spiritual muscle. Eventually, the gap shortens. Realization and demonstration begin to occur closer together as your consciousness stabilizes in truth. The second major challenge is what Joel called the race belief. This is the collective consciousness of humanity that believes in lack, disease, limitation, and separation. Even as you realize spiritual truth personally, you are swimming in an ocean of opposite belief. This collective fear can pull you back into old patterns, especially during times of stress or crisis. Joel taught that you cannot change the race belief, but you can become immune to it. How? By dwelling so consistently in spiritual consciousness that the collective fear finds nothing in you to attach to. When everyone around you is panicking about economic collapse, you remain grounded in the truth that divine substance is not subject to human economics. This does not make you better than others. It makes you a transparency for truth that can help others by your very presence. Your consciousness becomes a light in the darkness, not by preaching, but simply by remaining steadfast in spiritual realization. Others will feel this and be lifted, even if they do not understand what is happening. The practice is to recognize when you are being influenced by race belief. Notice when fear arises not from your direct experience, but from news, social media, or collective anxiety. In those moments, consciously return to your realization. The Lord is my shepherd. This is true regardless of what the world believes. My consciousness determines my experience, not the collective consciousness. The third challenge is impatience with the process. Modern spirituality often promises instant results, miraculous transformations overnight. Joel taught something different. Spiritual consciousness is cultivated like a garden, not microwaved like fast food. Some people experience rapid shifts, others take months or years. Neither is better. Each person's journey unfolds according to their consciousness readiness. Impatience itself reveals material sense. You want results now because you are still identified with the problem, still seeing it as real and threatening. True spiritual consciousness is willing to rest in truth regardless of timing. You are not practicing to get results. You are practicing because the truth is true, and living in truth is its own reward, regardless of demonstrations. Joel often told students, practice for at least 90 days before evaluating results. Give your consciousness time to shift at deep levels. Many people quit after 2 weeks because nothing visible changed. They never stayed long enough for the inner transformation to complete. The outer demonstration would have come if they had maintained their realization just a bit longer. The practice is to release attachment to outcomes while maintaining commitment to truth. This is paradoxical, but essential. You care deeply about living in spiritual consciousness, but you do not care about proving it works through demonstrations. When you achieve this balance, demonstrations often come naturally because you are no longer blocking them with anxious demanding. The fourth challenge is dealing with setbacks. You practice diligently, experience improvements, then suddenly circumstances seem to worsen. Health declines, money problems intensify, relationships deteriorate. This can feel like spiritual practice failed you. Joel called these testing periods moments when your consciousness is being challenged to deepen, not signs that the teaching is false. These setbacks often occur right before major breakthroughs. Why? Because as your consciousness rises to a new level, everything unlike that level, is forced to surface to be released. The deeper disease behind the symptom emerges to be healed. The hidden fear behind the anxiety becomes visible. This feels like things are getting worse, but actually the healing is intensifying. Joel's advice during these times: do not judge by appearances. Maintain your realization with even greater determination. This is when your practice becomes powerful, when you choose truth despite overwhelming contrary evidence. Many people quit during these testing periods, right before their consciousness would have broken through to a new level of realization. The practice is to expect challenges as part of the journey. Do not interpret difficulty as failure. Interpret it as your consciousness growing strong enough to handle deeper healing. Keep declaring, "The Lord is my shepherd," even when everything visible suggests otherwise. This is faith in the true sense, not blind belief, but choosing spiritual reality over material appearance consistently. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Now we move into advanced integration, living these principles in daily complexity. A doctor who studied with Joel faced an ethical dilemma. He knew a patient's diagnosis meant death within months, yet the patient was asking if everything would be fine. Should he lie with false hope or speak medical truth that would create fear? Neither option felt aligned with spiritual consciousness. Joel taught him something profound. Truth is not what you say, but what consciousness you hold while speaking. The doctor could speak honestly about the medical prognosis while simultaneously holding the spiritual truth that this patient was divine consciousness, untouched by disease or death. He could deliver difficult news from a consciousness of peace rather than doom. The doctor tried this approach. He explained the medical reality clearly, without sugarcoating, but his consciousness was resting in spiritual truth. This diagnosis describes the body, not the real person. The patient felt something different in how the news was delivered. Instead of collapsing in despair, he felt strangely peaceful. He asked the doctor, "Do you think this is the whole story?" The doctor replied, "Medical science sees what it can measure, but you are more than what can be measured." The patient lived 9 months beyond the prognosis, not fighting the disease but resting in a deeper reality. He died peacefully, having used those months to heal relationships and find spiritual understanding. The medical prediction was not wrong, but it was not complete either. A teacher implementing Joel's teachings faced different challenges. How do you maintain spiritual consciousness while dealing with disruptive students, demanding parents, and administrative pressure? She found that trying to see every difficult student as spiritual perfection felt false, like denial of obvious behavioral problems that needed addressing. Joel would say, "Seeing the Christ in someone does not mean ignoring human behavior. It means holding two perspectives simultaneously. You address the behavior that needs correction while never losing sight of the spiritual identity underneath. You discipline from love, not judgment. You set boundaries from wisdom, not fear." The teacher practiced this dual awareness. When a student acted out, she would silently acknowledge, "You are spiritual consciousness, whole and complete, even though your behavior right now does not reflect that." She set firm boundaries, but from a place of recognizing the student's true nature, not condemning their temporary condition. Something shifted in how students responded to her. Difficult students who resisted other teachers cooperated with her. Not because she was lenient, she was not, but because they felt seen at a deeper level. They felt her consciousness saying, "I see who you really are beyond this behavior, and I will not let you settle for less." This is advanced spiritual practice, holding truth while functioning effectively in the human scene. A parent struggling with an adult child's addiction asked Joel, "How do I practice spiritual consciousness while watching my child destroy their life? Do I enable them by not worrying? Do I abandon them to divine will?" Joel's answer challenged conventional spiritual thinking. Love takes action, but conscious action guided by wisdom, not reactive action driven by fear. He taught the parent to separate spiritual truth from human responsibility. Spiritually, recognize your child as divine consciousness, incapable of being truly harmed. Humanly, set boundaries, refuse to enable, offer support that helps rather than hinders. These are not contradictory. They are different levels of reality operating simultaneously. The parent practiced holding spiritual truth during meditation, then taking wise action during the day. She stopped giving money that funded addiction but offered to pay for treatment. She refused to accept frantic midnight calls but stayed available for sober conversation. She held the truth of her child's wholeness while letting natural consequences teach necessary lessons. This was not easy. Every spiritual instinct wanted to rescue, to fix, to control outcomes. But she realized that true love sometimes means stepping back and allowing pain that leads to growth. Her consciousness shifted from anxious mother to wise witness, seeing with spiritual eyes while acting with practical wisdom. The child eventually found recovery, but more importantly, the parent found peace regardless of outcome. An executive managing a failing company asked Joel if spiritual principles applied to business decisions. Should he fire underperforming employees while seeing them as spiritual perfection? Should he make cutbacks while trusting divine abundance? Joel taught that spiritual consciousness does not make business decisions for you. It makes you clear enough to see what decisions need to be made. The executive learned to approach each decision from inner stillness. Before meetings, he would sit silently acknowledging, "Divine intelligence is operating through this situation. I do not have to figure this out alone." Then he would enter the meeting and participate fully, using his best judgment, trusting that clarity would come. He stopped trying to force spiritual principles onto business problems. Instead, he let spiritual consciousness inform his thinking naturally. Some employees needed to be released, not as punishment, but as recognition that they were not in the right role. Some budgets needed cutting, not from fear, but from practical wisdom about sustainable operations. The company did not miraculously recover, but it stabilized and eventually grew again. More importantly, the executive discovered that spiritual principles work not by overriding practical reality, but by bringing clarity to it. He made better decisions not because God told him what to do, but because his consciousness was clear of fear and attachment. This is spiritual practice in daily complexity. We arrive now at total transformation, understanding what Joel called the impersonal nature of spiritual truth. The Lord is my shepherd is not personal favoritism, where God loves you more than others. It is universal spiritual law available to everyone the moment they recognize it. You are not special for knowing this. You are simply awake to what has always been true. This impersonal understanding frees you from spiritual ego. You are not advanced because you practice these principles. You are not better than those who do not understand them. You simply have access to a teaching that transforms consciousness when applied. This keeps you humble, grateful, and willing to share without needing to prove anything. The transformation becomes complete when you stop trying to demonstrate spiritual truth and simply live in it. You no longer practice to get things. You practice because living in spiritual consciousness is itself the goal. Whether circumstances improve or not becomes secondary to the peace of knowing your true nature and resting in it. Joel taught that this final shift is the most important, from seeking results to living in truth for its own sake. When you reach this point, demonstrations often come effortlessly because you are no longer blocking them with demand. But more importantly, you do not need them to validate your spiritual understanding. You are free. This transformation changes how you see everything. Problems stop being enemies to fight and become invitations to deepen realization. You welcome challenges because they reveal where your consciousness still holds material sense. Each difficulty becomes an opportunity to practice choosing truth over appearance, spiritual reality over material evidence. Your relationships transform because you stop needing things from people. You see others as spiritual consciousness expressing uniquely, not as sources of supply or threat. This does not make you distant or uncaring. It makes you more present and loving because you are not constantly calculating what you can get or avoid from each interaction. Your relationship with money, health, and security fundamentally shifts. You use these things but are not dependent on them for your sense of well-being. You participate in the human world fully while knowing it is not your source. This is the freedom Joel spent his life teaching. In the world but not of it, handling material responsibilities from spiritual consciousness. You discover that the 23rd Psalm was not exaggerating. You truly shall not want, not because all desires are fulfilled, but because your consciousness rests in divine completeness. You fear no evil, not because nothing threatens, but because you see through appearance to spiritual reality. You dwell in the house of consciousness forever, recognizing it as your true home. The final teaching Joel left us is this: spiritual consciousness is not maintained through constant effort, but through returning. You will forget. You will slip back into material sense. You will react from fear instead of resting in truth. This is not failure. This is the human experience. The practice is simply to recognize when you have wandered and return to the shepherd. Imagine consciousness as a home base. Throughout your day, you wander into fear, judgment, material concern, reactive emotion. The moment you notice, you return home. The Lord is my shepherd. Back to center. Back to truth. Back to peace. You will do this thousands of times. Each return strengthens your consciousness. Over time, the returns happen faster. You catch yourself sooner. You do not wander as far. The space between forgetting and remembering shrinks. Eventually, you live mostly in spiritual consciousness with brief excursions into material sense, rather than the other way around. This is mastery, not perfection, but predominance of truth over appearance. Joel would say, be patient with yourself. Be compassionate with your humanness. Do not judge your spiritual progress by how rarely you forget, but by how quickly you remember. Every return to truth is a victory. Every choice of spiritual reality over material appearance strengthens your consciousness. You are not trying to achieve something. You are uncovering what has always been true. So here we stand at the end of this revelation, but really at the beginning of your practice. The secret behind the 23rd Psalm is not in the words, but in the consciousness that lives them. You now understand what few people know. This is not a prayer of hope, but a declaration of present spiritual truth that transforms your entire life when deeply realized. You have the teaching, you have the practices, you have seen the challenges and learned how to meet them. You understand that this is not a quick fix, but a lifelong deepening into spiritual consciousness that brings peace regardless of circumstances, provision that flows from within, and freedom from fear that no external condition can provide. The question now is simple. Will you practice? Will you commit to returning again and again to this truth until it becomes your living experience? Will you rest in the awareness that the Lord is your shepherd right now, not tomorrow, not after you fix your problems, but in this very moment, regardless of what appearances suggest? Joel Goldsmith spent his life proving that spiritual consciousness heals, provides, and transforms when we stop seeking and start recognizing what is already true. You are not separate from your source. You are not waiting for divine intervention. You are divine consciousness itself. And the moment you deeply realize this, everything changes. Not the world, but your experience of it. And that changes everything. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.